GraphQL. Here's the code. We're going to run the results here. 3, 2, 1. There we go. LINQPad showing us the goods. In this video, we're going to demystify, lower the bar on GraphQL. And in doing that, we're going to use the GraphQL.net library. You can find that. I have LINQPad here. This is what makes it easy to write the code, pull in just the things that we need, get those, I like to call them like the Lego blocks of doing our software development. We're just going to figure out the foundational principles on how this is all built. Get a little GraphQL primer here. I'll show you some cool things. But at the end of this video, I want you to know, I want you to feel comfortable knowing what the basics of a GraphQL API, and then live working code samples that you can use, extend, and base your work off of. So notice in our script here, right, this script, it's think of this like a console application. That's kind of like what a LINQPad script is at its core. And there is no web API going on here. There is no ASP.NET going on here. This is just a GraphQL schema that we've created, right? And I'll kind of scroll up here, show you the schema that we have, query and mutation. We'll scroll down. It did work in some dependency injection, and you'll just simply need to know dependency injection, or at least be comfortable talking about having a casual understanding of it, because GraphQL.net is heavy on the dependency injection. That's just table stakes for working with that library. So I did add a little bit of that up here because you're going to have to see it anyways. But in our script here, right, there's no web API stuff going on. I can just run GraphQL queries and mutations. So first here, I run a query. I get the players out of my repository. And so here is the data over here formatted on the right. Kind of my running joke with GraphQL work is, hey, how would you like your JSON arranged today, sir? Because we're going to send JSON data into GraphQL, and we're going to get JSON out of it. And it's all about how do you want it organized? What are our queries going to look like? What are our mutations going to look like? What are our fields going to look like? And that has a huge impact on, it's the major impact on the data, how we design the API and the data that we get out of it. So back to this, we run the code, we run our query, we get the players, then I run a mutation. A mutation in GraphQL is it's just where we agree, handshake agreement, where we agree to put our code that's going to change things. That's what goes into a mutation. So if you think about the CRUD acronym, it's everything but the read. So that creates the updates and the deletes, and then any like actions that someone could take in your system. Things that are going to get changed, they go into a mutation. All right, so we run our mutation. I have a mutation here set up called player create, and this is going to let us add a player into our repository or into our collection. And then I run the query again. I run the players query again to get all of our players out of here. And you can see now we have 3 players. We started up here with 2, we added 1, and now we have 3. I'm going to want to reiterate, this is the purest GraphQL example I can provide because there's no web API going on. There's nothing else. This is GraphQL ground level as it gets. And if you can understand this, then we can layer on additional topics, additional complexity over time in your API. But this is where you have to start. This is the very basics here. So I have another example over here where we can now layer on or go into the API version or the web API version of GraphQL. Again, I'm still doing some dependency injection, but now I've added some GraphQL middleware. These are all packaged GraphQL.net and some other packages. This is giving us all this functionality, and we're going to go take a look at GraphQL. So I'm at 1,000, and now we see GraphQL running. So the early days before Postman got support and all these other tools got support for doing GraphQL natively, GraphQL is just calls using post and organizing your data in a specific way so the GraphQL API can understand it. Right, going back to over here, this is like if you send in a web API call or a post call with your GraphQL stuff, it gets distilled down into this to actually still run it and get the data in and out of GraphQL. This is what it's distilled down to, even if we're sending data like this over here. So if I say let's run a query and I want to get players, and I want to get the ID, the name, and the team. Well, I want to get the jersey number, and I want to get the team with the name. Right, so we don't need variables down here, so I'm going to get rid of those. We can minimize that. Click this button here, Prettify. So this will give this will kind of do some query formatting, and I click Run, and you can see this is the same data I was just getting out of my simple script. But here we are in the API, and you can see some API activity going on here. These 400s are, it's trying to do something with WebSockets, and that's all disabled. So just kind of ignore those 400s for now. It's just noise. Yeah, so here's GraphQL. Now, one of the primary benefits, or a big benefit you'll get from a GraphQL API, is you will get this documentation tab over here. And this is a native thing from GraphQL, exposed and shown through GraphQL. It's called introspection. And when we go into our schema, all of the types that we're creating here, this feeds into documentation that GraphQL calls introspection. And when GraphQL starts, it sends a query to your GraphQL API to get the introspection. We call it the introspection query. And that allows it to figure out all the things that it can do, all the types it can do. It's like its own version of an open API spec. GraphQL came out 2014, 2015 is maybe kind of when it really started to get big. I think Open API was probably a thing at that time, but definitely not as caught on as it is today. So they have their own version of documentation. And this is super helpful because I can just click through these and see what my API is capable of. You could take GraphQL and you could point this at some arbitrary GraphQL API and probably get their documentation as well. I can see the mutation. Here's my player create. So remember, queries are where we put our code to retrieve things out of the API. Mutations are where we put our code to change things in the API. And that is just purely a handshake agreement. GraphQL doesn't give us anything for free. If we wanted to do something, we have to go write code to do that. I think that that's probably a common misconception that we're going to get all this stuff for free if we just do GraphQL. And it's like, no, you're actually probably going to do more work writing all this extra code. All right, if we go look at our schema, right, I have a couple, like we'll call them like POCO classes here in .NET parlance, team and player, the actual models we want to work with. And then for all the GraphQL stuff, I have to do a lot of work. I have to basically redefine everything and tell GraphQL how we're going to work with it. So tons of code. I'm going to say it's close to like code duplication, but there's a lot of extra code to write to make your GraphQL API work and tick. And so I want to be clear, like you're probably signing yourself up for more work to go this approach, although I think the final product is nicer. So there's some trade-offs you have to balance there. Now, another cool thing about GraphQL that I really like is that when we have a complex type, or maybe any type, but I think primarily complex type, we can tell GraphQL to resolve this differently. So if we go look at my code and the player graph type, when someone asks for the team field, which is what we're doing right here, it's actually going to run some entirely different code. And right now, this is just hard-coded to pull it out of a switch based on the player that's getting processed. But this actually gets access to the player from up here. The player, if this is a collection, it gets access to each player in the collection, and it can do something with it. So you might have to, if you're talking about orders and you want to get the order details, maybe you need to go to an entirely different system or an entirely different database. Or we want to manage, how calls, if they're expensive or they take a long time. Based on how we design our API, we can have these things resolve into entirely different blocks of code. And so you're able to present a really nice facade to the clients, a really nice cover, and then behind the scenes, you can manage the complexity on how you want to get that data, how you want to retrieve it, how you want to cache it, etc. Really nice benefit to GraphQL APIs. Now, we looked at queries, but let's jump up another tab here with a mutation. So here's what it looks like to run a mutation. This is still all a post, and I've just agreed to, when I run a mutation, I've put my code to change the players, or to add players, right? I've put that in a mutation. So I run this syntax, which is kind of goofy. It takes, you gotta get there. So you'll get the hang of it, I promise, if you write enough of these. But for now, we can just look at it, and then I pass in some variables. And so I want to add Messi, a jersey number, and when I click run, now my player has been added. I get back, he's got the ID field, which shows me that this object actually got added. And if I go back to my queries and I run it now, we can see Messi is coming back with my in my player's query. So here we go, LINQPad. I cannot stress enough, right? I cannot understate the importance of LINQPad in these examples, allowing us to pull the threads, the foundational threads of GraphQL, build up a minimal working example, and use this to then add complexity, to add more features, and continue understanding them along the way. I'm using the dump field from LINQPad to get this nice formatting over here. Yeah, this is it. So this is GraphQL in a nutshell. Hope this was helpful. Hope this kind of demystifies and lowers the bar here a little bit on what's going on. Enjoy the video. Good luck with your GraphQL journey. Have fun.